The War Council chamber aboard the Hegemony flagship Eternal Dominion hummed with the energy of 1,000 integrated systems. Supreme Commander Zekthar stood before the holographic display, his four eyes tracking the tactical readout with what passed for amusement among his kind. The blue-green planet rotating slowly in the projection seemed so insignificant, so vulnerable. "Commander, the preliminary scans are complete," his tactical officer reported, mandibles clicking in what Zekthar recognized as poorly suppressed laughter. "You need to see this." Zekthar gestured with one of his primary appendages. The display shifted, showing catalogued images of human weapons, crude metal tubes, chemical propellants, solid projectiles. His entire bridge crew fell silent, then erupted in what could only be described as mocking chittering. "They still use kinetic weapons?" Zekthar's translator struggled to convey his disbelief. "Solid projectiles accelerated by burning chemicals?" "Confirmed, Commander. Their most advanced starships are equipped with missile systems that—" The tactical officer paused, as if double-checking the data, "that literally explode on impact. No plasma disruption, no quantum destabilization, no dimensional phasing, just boom." The bridge erupted in laughter again. Zekthar allowed it. His crew had served with distinction across 30 conquered worlds. They had faced the crystalline warriors of Theta-9, the hive collectives of the Andromeda Reach, the cybernetic legions of the machine worlds. All had fallen before the Hegemony's technological supremacy, and now, humanity. "Pull up their combat footage," Zekthar ordered. The hologram shifted to display human soldiers in combat. They wore fabric and ceramic armor, carried weapons that spat metal projectiles, and threw explosive devices by hand. By hand, like primitives hurling rocks. "This is the species that refused our terms?" First Officer Krelvac asked, his vocal sacs inflating with derision. "The one that transmitted that message telling us to, what was the phrase, come and take it?" "The same," Zekthar confirmed. He'd studied the transmission personally. The human ambassador, a scarred female with ice in her voice, had rejected the Hegemony's generous offer of subjugation. She'd called it an extinction-level mistake on their part. How quaint, how deluded. "Their largest vessel displaces barely 2 million tons, the tactical officer continued. "Our dreadnoughts are 40 times that size. Their energy shields are primitive force fields that can't even stop our scout ship's weapons. And their population centers," he paused, zooming the display to show human cities, "are completely exposed on the planetary surface. No subterranean infrastructure, no atmospheric shields, just buildings made of concrete." Zekthar felt something stirring in his tactical mind, a whisper of concern that he immediately dismissed. 30 worlds, 30 victories. The Hegemony had never been stopped. "I want this quick," he announced. The Council grows impatient. 3 cycles to achieve complete orbital superiority, 7 to pacify the surface. I want the humans to understand exactly how outmatched they are. Start with their military installations, then move to population centers. We'll leave enough alive to serve as workers. The rest—" He made a gesture that needed no translation. "Commander," a junior officer spoke up hesitantly, "should we be concerned about their chemical weapons? Some of the scans show they've developed rather creative applications of toxic compounds." "Worried about poison gas?" Krelvac laughed. "Our atmospheric processors will neutralize anything they can throw at us. Besides, we'll be conducting most operations from orbit. Let them choke on their own primitive chemistry." Zekthar pulled up the final briefing document. Intelligence estimated Earth's total military capability at approximately 4,000 vessels of various sizes, perhaps 200 million soldiers, and an arsenal that would have been impressive 3,000 years ago when the Hegemony was still using similar technology. The humans had one advantage, the intelligence brief noted. They bred fast and seemed unusually aggressive for a developing species. The report flagged Earth as a Class 3 Deathworld, meaning its evolutionary pressures had created a species with higher baseline resilience and aggression than standard. But that just meant they'd fight harder before inevitably dying. "Begin the operation," Zekthar commanded. "All fleet elements, move to attack formation. Let's teach these primitives why the hegemony rules the stars." The fleet moved like a cloud of locusts blotting out the sun. 1,500 vessels of the hegemony's third conquest fleet dropped out of dimensional fold space at the edge of Earth's solar system. Their energy signatures alone should have been enough to inspire immediate surrender. Instead, humanity's response was a single transmission, broadcast across all frequencies: "You should have brought more ships." Zekthar dismissed it as bravado. How wrong he was. The first indication that something was different came when the hegemony fleet crossed the orbit of the humans' fourth planet, Mars they called it. Long-range sensors detected movement, thousands of small contacts, accelerating on intercept courses. "Missiles," the tactical officer reported. "Primitive chemical rockets, nuclear payload yield approximately 1 megaton each. Time to impact 4 hours. 4 hours. Zekthar couldn't suppress his amusement. "Their weapons are so slow we could literally fly around them. Point defense systems track and destroy at leisure." But then the missiles did something unexpected. They spread out, each one taking a different vector, accelerating and decelerating in random patterns. And they kept coming. Not thousands, tens of thousands. The display lit up like a starfield. "Sir, the volume of projectiles is significant. Point defense systems are having difficulty acquiring targets due to the sheer number, then increase power to the defensive grid. They're just missiles. Just missiles." The words would haunt Zekthar. The first wave hit the outer screening elements of the fleet. The hegemony's point defense systems were magnificent, capable of tracking and destroying thousands of targets per second with precise plasma bursts. Against any conventional enemy, they were impenetrable, but the humans hadn't sent conventional missiles. Each warhead was surrounded by a cloud of chaff, decoys, and electronic warfare packages that would have been sophisticated 300 years ago and were laughably obsolete now. Except they worked through sheer numbers. For every real warhead, there were 100 false signatures. The point defense systems burned through power reserves trying to eliminate every possible threat. And while they were distracted, the real warheads closed in. The nuclear detonations began to bloom across the fleet's outer perimeter. Each explosion was primitive, crude, just uncontrolled fission reactions releasing energy in a spherical pattern. But each one generated an electromagnetic pulse that cascaded through the hegemony's unshielded sensor arrays. "Damage report," Zekthar barked. 7 escort frigates destroyed, 14 damaged. "They're using nuclear weapons in space, Commander. The radiation is—" "I can see that," Zekthar snapped. How had the humans known? The hegemony shields were optimized against directed energy weapons and kinetic impactors. Nuclear weapons had been obsolete for so long that no one had considered them a threat worth shielding against. The EMP effects alone were disrupting sensors across the fleet. "Sir, detecting multiple launches from Earth's surface, thousands of additional missiles, and—" The tactical officer's voice took on a note of confusion. "We're detecting kinetic launch signatures from the lunar surface and from asteroid positions throughout the belt. Kinetic launches, mass drivers." Zekthar pulled up the tactical display and felt the first touch of real concern. The humans weren't just throwing missiles, they were throwing everything. Kinetic kill vehicles, just chunks of metal accelerated to relativistic speeds. Against shields, they should have been nothing. But the nuclear strikes had weakened the defensive screens, and the sheer volume of fire was overwhelming. All ships, evasive maneuvers, get us out of the kill zone. But the hegemony ships, massive and powerful, were built for overwhelming force, not maneuverability. The human projectiles, despite being primitive, were fast and came from every angle. The humans had seeded their entire solar system with weapons platforms, and now they were activating all of them at once. The first mass driver round hit a heavy cruiser at 0.4 light speed. The impact released more energy than a strategic nuclear weapon. The cruiser's shields held for exactly 1/10 of a second before the projectile punched through, tearing through the hull like paper. The ship didn't explode, it simply ceased to exist in any meaningful way, transformed into an expanding cloud of superheated plasma. "Impossible," Krelvac shouted. "Chemical rockets can't achieve those velocities. They're not using chemical propulsion for the kinetic kills," the tactical officer reported, working frantically at his station. "They're using electromagnetic acceleration, railguns, mass drivers, coil guns. Ancient technology but scaled up to planetary proportions, and they've had them pre-positioned for months, maybe years." Zekthar felt something cold settle in his core. The humans had been waiting for someone to attack them. This wasn't a desperate defense, this was a trap. "Get me a firing solution on Earth. I want every siege cannon we have focused on their population centers. We'll burn that planet to glass." "Sir, we're detecting launches from Earth's ocean surfaces, submarine-based platforms, and there are hundreds of small craft emerging from the dark side of their moon." The tactical display was now a chaos of red indicators. Human forces were everywhere, not just in the obvious places, but hidden in asteroid fields, lurking in the outer system, concealed in the shadows of moons and planets. Every one of them was now firing, and their weapons, primitive as they were effective. A spread of human missiles overwhelmed the shields of a destroyer. The ship's point defense systems were simply overloaded, tracking so many targets that they burned out their own power cores. When the missiles hit, they didn't just explode. They fragmented, sending thousands of submunitions in every direction. The destroyer emerged from the cloud of destruction, looking like it had been shot with a cosmic shotgun, hull breached in 1,000 places. "They're using cluster munitions," someone shouted unnecessarily. "Deploy our fighters," Zekthar ordered. "Clear those missile platforms." The Hegemony's fighter craft were engineering marvels, fast, shielded, equipped with plasma cannons that could carve through starship hulls. 3,000 of them launched from the fleet's carrier vessels, streaking toward the asteroid belt weapons platforms, and ran straight into humanity's aerospace fighters. The human craft were, like everything else in their arsenal, absurdly primitive. They used reaction drives, were built around a single pilot who actually flew the craft manually, and their weapons were kinetic cannons, just tubes that fired metal projectiles at high velocity. But there were so many of them, and they fought like demons. Commander Zekthar watched in disbelief as a human fighter, barely 30 meters long, executed a maneuver that should have killed its pilot, spinning while firing its rotary cannons in a continuous stream. The projectiles stitched across a Hegemony fighter, and despite the shields, despite the advanced armor, the sheer kinetic energy of hundreds of rounds impacting the same spot punched through. "How are they maneuvering like that?" Krelvac demanded. "Those acceleration forces should liquefy their pilots." "Their pilots are wearing pressure suits and are augmented with chemical stimulants," came the response. "And they don't care about the G-forces. They're flying through maneuvers that should kill them. Because they come from a Deathworld," Zekthar realized. These humans had evolved under higher gravity, had been shaped by a planet trying to kill them at every turn. What would cripple another species they shrugged off. The fighter engagement became a massacre, but not the one Zekthar had anticipated. Human pilots flew with reckless creativity, using every advantage their smaller, more maneuverable craft provided. When their cannons ran out of ammunition, they rammed. When their craft were damaged, they ejected toward Hegemony ships and detonated explosive charges manually. They fought like they had nothing to lose, like death was an acceptable outcome as long as they took the enemy with them. "Sir, we're losing fighter superiority. Recommend we pull back to—" "We don't retreat from primitives," Zekthar roared. But even as he said it, he was watching his fleet being whittled down by these same primitives. 20 ships destroyed, 40% damaged, and they hadn't even reached Earth orbit yet. "Sir, detecting energy signatures from Earth's surface. Multiple locations. They're building up charge in massive ground-based weapons." The holograms showed what the humans had built. Enormous railguns, each 1 kilometer long, buried in the Earth's crust and powered by entire cities' worth of fusion reactors. Not fusion like the Hegemony used, controlled and clean. Human fusion was barely contained chaos, burning far hotter and less efficiently, but producing tremendous power, and they'd built dozens of these weapons. All aimed up, evasive maneuvers, all ships. The first railgun fired. The projectile was simple, just a tungsten rod 10 meters long and 1 meter wide, surrounded by a disposable sabot. It exited the railgun at 2% light speed, riding a magnetic wave that nearly tore the weapon apart with each shot. It hit a Hegemony cruiser dead center. The kinetic energy was so tremendous that the cruiser's shields didn't so much fail as simply cease to be relevant. The projectile punched through the shield, the armor, the hull, and came out the other side, having passed completely through the ship so fast that for a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the cruiser broke in half, atmosphere venting, fusion reactors going critical, crew being sucked into space through a hole that had been superheated into glass. The other railguns fired in sequence. Tungsten rods screamed up from Earth's surface, each one leaving a trail of ionized air and electromagnetic distortion. They were dumb weapons, no guidance systems, no target tracking. They were just very fast, very heavy projectiles following ballistic trajectories, but the humans had calculated those trajectories perfectly. Zekthar watched 3 more ships die in as many seconds. Pull back. All ships pull back to defensive formation. Sir, we're detecting movement from the human fleet. They've been holding position near Earth's moon, but they're now advancing. Of course they were. The humans had waited until the Hegemony fleet was engaged with their automated defenses, shields weakened by nuclear strikes, sensors scrambled by EMP, formations broken by railgun fire. And now they were moving in for the kill. The human fleet was tiny compared to the Hegemony's armada. Their largest ships were a fraction of the size of even Hegemony cruisers. But as Zekthar was learning, size wasn't everything. The human dreadnoughts, they called them carriers, disgorged more fighters, thousands more. These were armed not with kinetic weapons but with missiles, each one equipped with what the humans called a high-explosive anti-tank warhead. Shaped charges designed to punch through armor by focusing explosive force into a narrow jet of superheated metal. Against modern shields, they should have been useless, but modern shields had been designed to stop energy weapons and high-velocity impacts, not chemical explosives that essentially melted through armor on contact. The first Hegemony ship hit by these antiquated weapons reported in disbelief as the missiles burned through their hull plating like a cutting torch. Adapt shield frequencies, Zekthar ordered. Compensate for chemical explosive penetration. But that meant dropping power from the energy weapon defenses, which meant the human laser batteries, yes, they had lasers, weapons so old most species had abandoned them, could now inflict damage. The humans were using a mix of technologies, each one independently obsolete, but together creating a synergistic effect that the Hegemony's defensive systems weren't designed to counter. It was brilliant. Maddening, but brilliant. Sir, human fleet is within weapons range. They're targeting our command ships. Zekthar brought up the tactical feed from one of his forward destroyers. He saw what the destroyer saw. A human cruiser, barely a third its size, accelerating at speeds that should rip the ship apart. The destroyer's plasma batteries charged, locked on, fired. The human ship fired first. Not energy weapons, not missiles, kinetic weapons. Enormous railguns that ran the length of the ship, firing tungsten penetrators at 3% light speed. The rounds hit the destroyer's forward shields and just kept going. The shields slowed them, heated them, but couldn't stop them. They punched through into the destroyer's hull, passing through bulkheads and crew quarters and engineering spaces, each impact releasing tremendous kinetic energy. The destroyer tried to return fire, but its plasma batteries required time to recharge between shots. The human ship fired again, and again, and again. A continuous barrage of kinetic death that didn't stop, didn't slow, just kept hammering until the destroyer's shields collapsed completely and the hull ruptured. "They're using continuous fire kinetic weapons," the tactical officer shouted. "Our energy weapons are more powerful, but their fire rate is 10 times ours." And there it was, the ultimate truth of human warfare. They didn't need the most powerful weapon. They needed the weapon that could hit the most times. Quantity had a quality all its own. The human fleet closed in, and Zekthar saw them employ tactics he'd never encountered. Their ships moved in coordinated groups. They called them strike packages, each one composed of different vessel types. Carriers provided fighter cover. Cruisers delivered long-range kinetic bombardment. Destroyers launched missile swarms. Frigates conducted electronic warfare, jamming hegemony sensors and fire control systems. It was combined arms warfare, executed with a precision that spoke of centuries of practice. How many wars has this species fought, Zekthar wondered. How many times have they killed each other to perfect these tactics? The answer, he would learn later, was constantly. Humanity had never stopped fighting. They'd fought themselves for thousands of years, developing and refining the art of warfare into something approaching a science. Every weapon, every tactic, every strategy had been tested in actual combat against other humans who were equally creative, equally vicious, equally determined to win. The hegemony had conquered 30 worlds. Humanity had conquered themselves hundreds of times over. "Sir, receiving transmission from the human fleet, put it through." The hologram showed a human male, older, with gray hair and a face marked by what appeared to be burned scars. He wore a dark blue uniform decorated with symbols Zekthar didn't recognize. When he spoke, his voice was calm, almost conversational. "Hegemony Flagship Eternal Dominion. This is Admiral James Hawthorne, commanding United Earth Fleet, First Fleet. You are ordered to stand down and surrender your vessels. This is your only warning." Zekthar laughed. He couldn't help it. "Admiral Hawthorne, I command 1,500 ships. You have barely 200. Do you really expect— We expected you 3 months ago," Hawthorne interrupted. "We've had time to prepare. Your fleet is currently enveloped by 17,000 orbital weapons platforms, 200,000 autonomous drones, and about 500,000 missiles currently being launched from every major military installation on Earth. You came into our home system, threatened our world, and told us to surrender." The human smiled, and there was nothing pleasant in that expression. "We don't surrender, we adapt, and we overcome. So I'll ask you again, stand down or we'll put you down. You're bluffing. You can't possibly—" The tactical display lit up with new contacts, thousands of them. Tens of thousands. The humans had activated weapons platforms scattered throughout the entire solar system, many of them hidden in asteroids, on moons, in the debris of the Kuiper Belt. Each one was now launching. Zekthar had walked into a weapons platform disguised as a solar system. "All ships, emergency full jump, get us out of fold space, is jammed," the navigation officer reported, voice hollow. "They're broadcasting a jamming signal across all dimensional frequencies. We can't jump." Of course the humans had figured out how to jam dimensional travel. Why wouldn't they? If they could weaponize everything else, why not physics itself? "Then we fight our way out," Zekthar decided. "All remaining ships, form up on the flagship. We'll punch through their fleet and—" The words died as he saw what was emerging from behind Earth's moon. It was enormous. Not as large as the Hegemony's super dreadnoughts, but big enough to be impressive. And it was old. Zekthar could see the scars on its hull, the patchwork repairs, the mismatched armor plating. This ship had been through hell and somehow survived. "That's the Indomitable," Admiral Hawthorne's voice came through the still-open channel. "First ship humanity ever built that could survive a direct nuclear strike. We made her in a war we fought against ourselves. Now she's going to show you why you should have listened to our warning." The Indomitable opened fire. Every weapon on the ship fired at once. Kinetic cannons, missile batteries, railguns, laser arrays, even what appeared to be explosive charges just thrown into space. It was a wall of destruction, dozens of different weapon types all targeting the same point in the Hegemony formation. The combined firepower hit a Hegemony battle carrier. The shields held for 3 seconds. Then the missiles got through, followed by the kinetic rounds, followed by the railgun slugs. The battle carrier shuddered, armor plating peeling away, secondary explosions rippling across its hull. And then the humans did something that made Zekthar's blood run cold. They rammed it. A human frigate, already damaged and venting atmosphere, accelerated to maximum speed and drove itself straight into the battle carrier's exposed reactor section. The resulting explosion was visible from Earth, a miniature sun that briefly illuminated the battlefield. "They're ramming us," Krelvac shouted. "What kind of species?" "The kind that evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them," Zekthar said quietly. "The kind that learned warfare by practicing it on themselves. The kind that turns everything, even their own ships, into weapons." He understood now. Every assessment, every intelligence report, every analysis had missed the fundamental truth about humanity. They weren't just aggressive. They were creative in their aggression. Every human invention, every tool, every advancement had been immediately evaluated for its military application. They'd gone to space to find resources and immediately weaponized mass drivers for asteroid mining. They'd developed fusion power and built fusion bombs. They'd created artificial intelligence and turned it towards strategic planning. They'd even weaponized their own biology. The tactical feed showed human soldiers fighting in environments that would kill any other species, kept alive by cocktails of stimulants and genetic modifications. The humans had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing, and they'd gotten very, very good at it. "Sir, the flagship is taking fire. Shields at 60%. We need to—" Another transmission cut through. This one was different, not from Admiral Hawthorne, but from a younger voice, female, transmitting from what looked like a ground installation. "All Hegemony forces, this is Colonel Sarah Chen, United Earth Ground Forces, Olympus Mons Defense Command. You wanted a war? You wanted to see what humans can do?" Her voice was hard, angry. 99% of our species died in the bombardment you launched on our colonies. You killed our families, our friends, our children, and you thought we'd just roll over and die. The transmission showed footage. Hegemony ships firing on human colonies and outlying systems, civilian transports being destroyed, cities burning, billions dead. "You made a mistake," Colonel Chen continued. "You left 1% of us alive. And that 1% is coming for you. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon we have. We're not fighting for territory or resources or ideology. We're fighting for revenge. And we're very, very good at revenge." The transmission cut. Zekthar stared at the tactical display, watching his fleet, his magnificent, technologically superior fleet, being systematically dismantled by these relentless primitives. "How many ships have we lost?" he asked quietly. 247 destroyed, 438 damaged, came the hollow response. "Their losses are 73 ships destroyed, 200 damaged. The ratio is in their favor, sir. They're winning. Impossible. Inconceivable. The Hegemony didn't lose. They'd conquered 30 worlds. They'd crushed the crystalline warriors, the hive collectives, the machine legions. They'd never met a force that could stand against them. Until now. Sir, receiving reports from the surface assault teams." Zekthar almost didn't want to hear it. "Go ahead. The ground forces..." "Sir, they're requesting immediate evacuation. The human ground forces they're using chemical weapons, biological agents, dirty bombs, improvised explosives. They've turned entire cities into traps. Our troops are taking 90% casualties in urban environments. Of course. Of course the humans had weaponized their own cities. Why wouldn't they? They'd already weaponized everything else. Our soldiers report that the humans just don't stop. They take casualties that would break any other species, and they keep fighting. They've got soldiers who are barely functional, bleeding out, and they're still shooting. They're using civilians as spotters for artillery. They've trained their entire population in basic combat. Every human we encounter is a potential combatant. Zekthar closed his eyes. A death world. They'd attacked a species from a death world, and this was the result. Pull back all ground forces. Everyone we can recover, get them back to the ships. We're leaving. Sir, the jamming, I don't care about the jamming. Punch a hole through their fleet if we have to, but we're leaving this cursed system. The Hegemony fleet, what was left of it, attempted to disengage. But the humans weren't interested in letting them leave. They pursued like wolves, packs of small, fast ships harrying the larger Hegemony vessels, launching missiles, firing kinetic weapons, ramming when they had to. The Eternal Dominion took a direct hit from a human railgun. The bridge shuddered, and alarms screamed warnings about hull breaches on multiple decks. Shields failing. Engineering reports reactor instability. Zekthar looked at the tactical display one last time. 300 ships lost. Maybe 200 more would make it out of the system. The third conquest fleet, pride of the Hegemony, had been shattered by a species that still used chemical explosives and solid ammunition. "Open a channel to the human fleet," he said. Admiral Hawthorne's face appeared again, still calm, still controlled. "Ready to surrender, Commander?" "Why?" Zekthar asked. "Why fight so hard? We offered you a place in the Hegemony. You would have been allowed to live, to serve. Why resist?" Hawthorne's expression didn't change. "You killed 99% of us. You thought that would break us. But you don't understand humanity, Commander. When you kill 99% of us, that last 1% doesn't surrender. They don't negotiate, they come for revenge, and they bring every weapon, every tactic, every ounce of hate they have. You tried to exterminate us, we're just returning the favor." "We surrender," Zekthar said. The words tasted like poison. "We surrender." "Too late for that," Hawthorne replied. "You came into our home. You killed our people. You don't get to surrender. You get to run if you can, and tell everyone you meet what happens when they attack humanity." The channel closed. The Eternal Dominion limped toward the edge of the system, drives damaged, shields failing, half the crew dead. Behind them, the human fleet followed, not to destroy but to escort them out. A final insult. They weren't even worth finishing off. Zekthar survived. They let him survive, probably so he could tell the story, so he could warn the galaxy about the species that still used bullets and missiles and bombs, and had used them to destroy the Hegemony's finest fleet. The news spread through the galaxy like wildfire. The humans, those primitive, aggressive creatures from a death world, had done the impossible. They defended their home system against a technologically superior force using weapons that most species had discarded millennia ago. The Hegemony Council, facing the loss of an entire fleet and the humiliation of defeat, wanted revenge. They prepared another fleet, larger, more powerful. But then the reports started coming in. Human ships, small and fast, were appearing throughout Hegemony space. Not to attack, but to deliver a message. The message was simple, delivered by Colonel Sarah Chen, the same woman who'd spoken from Olympus Mons. "You killed 99%. Humanity, the 1% that survived, has voted. The vote was unanimous. We're not interested in peace. We're not interested in coexistence. We're interested in teaching the galaxy a lesson about humanity. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to pull back from human space. You're going to leave us alone. And in return, we won't come for you. Yet." The transmission showed footage of human shipyards expanded and working at full capacity. Thousands of new ships being built, each one incorporating the lessons learned from the battle at Earth. The humans were industrializing for total war. "But if you come at us again," Chen continued, "if any species tries to exterminate us, we're not going to just defend ourselves. We're going to take that as a declaration that the galaxy wants to see what humanity can really do when we're fighting for our survival. And trust me, you don't want to see that." The Hegemony Council voted to accept the human terms. For the first time in their history, they surrendered territory. They pulled back from human space, established a demilitarized zone, and tried very hard to forget about the primitives with their chemical rockets and solid bullets. But the galaxy didn't forget. The story spread, the story of how humanity, a species so young they still fought with kinetic weapons, had defeated the mighty hegemony. Other species took notice. Some sought alliances with humanity, hoping to learn their tactical secrets. Others gave humans a wide berth, afraid of what might happen if they provoked these aggressive Deathworlders. A new term entered the Galactic lexicon, human tactics. It meant turning anything and everything into a weapon. It meant fighting with creativity and viciousness. It meant never, ever underestimating an opponent just because their technology seemed primitive. Admiral Hawthorne, in a transmission to the Galactic Federation, summed it up best. "You looked at our weapons and laughed. You saw our chemical rockets, our solid bullets, our nuclear bombs, and you thought we were primitive. But you forgot something important. We didn't keep using these weapons because we were too stupid to develop better ones. We kept using them because they work, because sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. Because a tungsten rod moving at relativistic speeds doesn't care how advanced your shields are. Because a nuclear weapon doesn't need targeting computers when it can just vaporize everything in a 10-kilometer radius." He paused, letting the words sink in. "You thought primitive meant ineffective. You thought old meant obsolete. You were wrong, and now you know better. Humanity keeps fighting with bullets and bombs and missiles because we're very, very good at it. We've had 10,000 years to perfect these weapons, and we're not stopping now. So here's my advice to anyone else considering attacking Earth. Don't make the same mistake the Hegemony made, because if you kill 99% of us, that last 1% is going to make you regret it for whatever short time you have left." The transmission ended. The message was clear. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, and they'd done it with weapons that most species considered museum pieces. They'd proven that technology alone didn't win wars. Creativity did. Determination did. The willingness to use any and every advantage, no matter how crude or brutal, did. On Earth, the survivors mourned their dead, the billions who had died in the initial hegemony strike. But they also celebrated their victory. They'd been pushed to the brink of extinction and fought their way back. They'd proven that humanity couldn't be exterminated easily. That even reduced to 1% of their population, they were still dangerous. The rebuilding began. The colonies would be reestablished, the dead would be honored, and the military would be expanded, because humanity had learned another lesson that day. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and you survived by being more dangerous than anything that wanted to kill you. Commander Zekthar returned to hegemony space a broken man. His testimony to the council was brief. "Do not engage the humans. Do not provoke them. Do not underestimate them. They are not like other species. They do not think like other species. They do not fight like other species. They are products of a death world, and they have weaponized everything, even their own survival instinct." The council asked if the humans could be defeated with sufficient force. Zekthar's response was simple, perhaps, but the cost would be total extinction for whatever species tried. The humans won't surrender. They'll make sure that even in defeat they take their enemies with them. They'll turn their planet into a weapon. They'll launch every missile, detonate every bomb, crash every ship. And in the end, even if you win, you'll have lost so much that the victory will be meaningless. The council decided that human space would remain untouched. A quarantine zone, some called it. A demilitarized zone of mutual respect, others said. But everyone knew the truth. It was fear. Fear of what humanity would do if pushed too far again. Years passed. Humanity expanded cautiously into the galaxy, always armed, always ready. They made allies among species who respected strength. They made enemies of those who didn't learn the lesson. And every time someone tested humanity's resolve, they learned the same truth the hegemony had learned. Humans don't fight fair, they fight to win. In the outer colonies, monuments were erected to the 99% who had died. Each one bore the same inscription: they tried to exterminate us. They failed. We remember. We endure. We prevail. And in the military academies of 100 worlds, a new case study was taught: the Battle of Earth, where a technologically inferior force had defeated a superior one through creativity, determination, and the willingness to turn anything into a weapon. Where chemical explosives and kinetic weapons had proven that primitive was just another word for tested and reliable. The lesson was clear: never underestimate humanity. Never assume that old weapons are ineffective weapons, and never ever kill 99% of them, because that last 1% will make you wish you'd never been born. On Earth, in the command center that had coordinated the defense, Admiral Hawthorne stood before a wall of names, billions of them, every human lost in the initial strike. He touched the wall gently, his fingers tracing letters he'd long since memorized. "We got them," he said quietly. "We made them pay. And we made sure no one else will ever try again." Behind him, Colonel Chen approached, her own gaze on the wall of the dead. "Do you think it's over, sir?" Hawthorne shook his head. "No. Someone else will try eventually. There's always someone who thinks they're strong enough, smart enough, ruthless enough to take us down. And when they come, we'll be ready," Chen finished. "We'll be ready," Hawthorne agreed, "because that's what we do. We fight, we adapt, we overcome. We're humanity, and we don't know how to quit." Outside, in orbit around Earth, the defense platforms remained active. The weapons that had destroyed the Hegemony's fleet stayed armed and ready. The shipyards continued producing vessels designed for one purpose: to ensure that humanity would never again be at the mercy of anyone. The message was clear, had been transmitted to every corner of the galaxy, and would echo through the centuries. Humanity had arrived. Humanity had been tested. And humanity had proven that even reduced to 1% of their population, even fighting with weapons other species considered obsolete, they were still the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Because they didn't just fight to survive, they fought to win. And they would use every weapon, every tactic, every dirty trick they'd learned in. 10,000 years of fighting themselves to make sure that any species that threatened them would regret it. The galaxy had tried to exterminate humanity. The galaxy had failed. And now the galaxy knew there are things worse than death, and one of them is making humanity angry. They killed 99% of humanity. The 1% came for revenge, and they brought with them every lesson learned, every weapon forged, every tactic tested in the crucible of human warfare. They brought bullets and bombs and missiles, chemical explosives and kinetic weapons, nuclear fire and railgun thunder. They brought war, human war. The kind of war that turns solar systems into battlefields and doesn't stop until the enemy is broken or dead. The Hegemony learned, the galaxy watched, and everyone came to the same conclusion. Humanity might use primitive weapons, but they wielded them with an expertise that made them anything but primitive. They'd had 10,000 years to master the art of killing, and they'd learned well. In the end, that's what made humanity terrifying. Not their technology, not their numbers, but their absolute unwavering refusal to lose. Their willingness to turn anything, ships, cities, planets, even themselves, into weapons if that's what it took to win. You can have better shields. You can have stronger armor. You can have weapons that make theirs look like toys. But when humans start fighting, when they commit to total warfare with all the creativity and viciousness that their violent history has taught them, none of that matters. Because they'll find a way. They always find a way. That's the lesson the Hegemony learned. That's the warning that echoes through the galaxy now. And that's why when humanity speaks, the galaxy listens. Because everyone knows what happens when you don't. You become a cautionary tale. Another species that thought humans were primitive. Another empire that underestimated bullets and bombs and the people who'd spent millennia perfecting their use. Another name added to the list of those who learned too late that, when it comes to warfare, humanity doesn't just fight to survive. They fight to make sure you regret ever threatening them in the first place. And that's why the galaxy fears the species that still uses bullets. Because after 10,000 years of practice, they've gotten very, very good at putting those bullets exactly where they need to go.